everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's been quite a while, but here I am with another video. As you can tell by the title, I am going to be talking about all of Sondheim's movie adaptations today. If you've been watching my channel for, I don't know, like any amount of time, you probably know that I'm a very big Sondheim fan. Obviously, if you're attuned to any of that, you also know that he passed away earlier, I guess in 2021, so a couple months ago now. He had a really awesome, long life and an amazing career, and obviously his legacy will live on in his works that everyone, I'm sure, watching this video, and probably anyone watching my channel, is going to enjoy forever, and that'll always be with us. But yeah, I thought I couldn't really, make this video without acknowledging that, and I'm just really glad to have been alive, at the same time as him, and I even got to see him speak once, which was amazing. But yeah, I just wanted to make another video for his birthday, which I've done in the past. I had a whole week of videos back in, I think, 2020. So just some general disclaimers before we actually get into the ranking. So one is that I'm only talking about major motion pictures, like feature films, so I'm not including any like TV movies or any recorded live performances, so that's a whole different thing. So it's just the feature films. Second disclaimer is that some of these movies, if you've seen them, you probably know, are a bit on the older side, made in 60s, 70s, things like that, and have some content that maybe wouldn't fly today. I'm not going to go too in-depth about any of that in this video, but be aware if you decide to watch any of those movies. That's just a little general warning. So let's just get started at the very, very bottom of our list. So let's just jump into the actual ranking. At the very bottom of our list, probably the easiest one to rank, is A Little Night Music. Unfortunately, this is a very bad movie. I actually love the show, like the actual musical version of it, but the movie is just, oh, it's so bad. I think this is the only one on this list that I would solidly say is just a bad movie. Like the rest of them, there's kind of positives and negatives. This one is just, it's like unwatchably bad. I had to get it out of the library to watch it on DVD because it's like literally you can't find it anywhere. It's pretty much been like scrubbed from the face of the earth. It's very bad. Not only is this the worst Sondheim adaptation, it's probably the worst musical adaptation I've ever seen. And that's comparing it to Paint Your Wagon, which is also like just laughably bad. Before I, really rip into this one, some of the good stuff, and by some I mean like two things that are good. One is the music. Obviously like the music, composed and written by Sondheim is really good, but also like the orchestrations and stuff are really good. The singing is a little bit more iffy, but the actual instrumental music is really good. The second is Diana Rigg, who plays Charlotte in it, I think, is really good. She steals every single scene. You guys might know her if you watch Game of Thrones. She's the I don't watch Game of Thrones, so I don't know the characters, but she's like a famous character in that. I'll put a picture somewhere. But she's really good. She's very funny. Now on to the bad, which there is a lot of. So probably the first thing that I'd say made this movie so unwatchable is that it's just really ugly. Like visually to look at, it's so ugly. The cinematography is awful. Just, oh god, the lighting is weird. There's all these weird shots that are just like, I don't even know why they did it like that. It's so ugly. The sets and costumes like fine, but it does not make up for just like how poorly it's shot and how weird and just like drab it looks. And especially because this is like, a period piece and stuff. If you watch the stage version of the musical or any like recorded versions of it, it's very lush and everything, and I've never seen the original movie that it's based on, but I think it's the same kind of thing. It's also just really boring. I don't really know how they even managed to do that, because the original show is not boring at all. They just changed, enough things that it kind of takes all the life out of it, and you're watching, you're like, how fucking long is this movie? And it's not that long. You're just like, geez, when will it end? The other performances, like I said, are not so great. There's some that are better than others, but overall, none of them really stand out except for Diana Rigg. The next point is that along with like just being visually really bad, it's also edited terribly. There's just so many weird cuts and abrupt scene changes and stuff where you're watching and you're like, wait, what just happened? And it just takes you out of the movie and takes you out of the moment. Also, this movie is like so passionless, which is saying something for a movie that has like so much sex and like sexual references in it. It's just surprising how much of the life that they sucked out of it. The last thing that's like a small thing, and I kind of get why they did it, but it also is just adds to my disappointment, is that they cut out my favorite song, which is The Miller's Son, which is one of my favorite Sondheim songs. It's so good. It's such an amazing song. I can see why they took it out, because it kind of comes at a weird moment that doesn't maybe work as well on film, but yeah, taking it out just really made me sad because it's my favorite. Overall, terrible movie. Would not recommend. I'm never gonna watch it again. Even if you wanted to watch it, you like can't find it anywhere. I had to get it out of the library, like I said, so not the best movie. The next ranking, number 6, is one that you've definitely more likely have seen or heard of or heard about, which is Into the Woods. I'm probably judging this a little bit harsher than the rest of them, only because Into the Woods is my absolute favorite Sondheim show. I say it's in the top 3 like favorite musicals of all time. I saw this in theaters many years ago when it came out when I was in high school, and I was just disappointed. It's not like the worst movie. There's still plenty to enjoy in it, and obviously it's still Into the Woods, so there's enough of the original show that it holds up that kind of stuff, but overall it just did not do justice to the original. And also I think another thing that makes this, some good things about this movie, I don't know, there's some good songs and some performances that I like. Meryl Streep did some good stuff. Overall, I do like Bernadette Peters better in the role. They really took a lot of the humor out of it, which was disappointing. The show's so funny when you watch like the actual stage version, but the movie either like completely changes the jokes or they present them in a way where it's like no longer a joke and it's just a straight line and it's not fun anymore. Some of the effects were cool, like when they have some of the more fantastical elements to it, that was fun. Like that's a good thing you can do with a film version rather than a stage version, is you can do kind of the crazier stuff that you can't do on stage. They took out a lot of the stuff with the baker and his father and all that, and some of the songs related to that, and that just really took away from the overall message of the movie to me, especially because like there's so much in that show about parenting and, you know, child-parent relationships and everything, that it really just detracts from the overall meaning and message of it, and it's just not as impactful as the original show is. Honestly, the thing with this movie is that it's just not really a show that works that well on film rather than on stage. There's so much like interaction with the audience, you know, with the narrator and really meta kind of commentary and stuff that is harder to do in a movie, or even if you are gonna do it in a movie, you would have to really change it, and they just didn't really adapt that stuff. They kind of just didn't bother. It just takes away a lot, in my opinion. Next, we have one that I feel like nobody really talks about because people just don't really care about it, and I understand why, and that's Gypsy. I'd pretty much describe it as fine. Like, it's a fine movie. The performances are okay, like they're fine, but it's nothing that memorable. Part of it too is that the show itself is not my favorite show. It's not like it's bad or anything, but just compared to the rest of the Sondheim shows, it's never been one that's really stuck with me or anything. I think too, part of it is that it's just really nothing special. You know, this is from the 60s when there was so many movie musicals being made around that time that are really great and very memorable, with some great performances and amazing songs and stuff. So it's hard to not compare this movie to a lot of other similar movies of the time. Yeah, it just doesn't really hold up as much. So another thing about this movie too is that Mama Rose is like such a famous character, and pretty much like every Broadway diva you can think of has played her. Inevitably, if you've seen the show even one time, you're gonna be comparing the movie version to another version that you've seen, or another Tony performance, or another concert version where somebody sings Rose's Turn. There's some really good stuff. I really like You Gotta Get a Gimmick. All those actresses that play the different strippers are really funny. It's just like not memorable. Like I'm trying to even think about like any parts that stood out to me, and nothing's really coming to mind because it's just not that great. I don't know. It's fine. I don't even have that much to say about it because it's kind of just there. Watch it if you like the original show, and you'd probably be like, hey, this is a pretty good adaptation. If you don't like the original show, probably not worth it. Okay, now we're finally, I think, at the part of this list where I actually genuinely enjoyed these movies, so maybe I'll have some more interesting things to say than these last two that were super, you know, meh. So next on my list at number 4 is A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. Again, little disclaimer, if you watch this, it's maybe a little bit outdated, maybe a little problematic, so be aware of that if you've never seen it. But it is a genuinely very funny movie. I think the strength of this movie is that it did what it set out to do, which is just be a funny comedy. It's a funny comedy. There's a lot of really good slapstick. Obviously, Zero Mostel is hilarious in it. Buster Keaton is in this movie. It was actually his last role before he died. He's very funny. Pretty much all the actors do very well with their role. There's a lot of like chase sequences and stunts and stuff like that worked really well on film, so I think that they did well with actually making it an adaptation for the screen rather than just, you know, a recording of the show, basically. The songs are really great, the singing is really good, which is I think the singing is really great, which is I think maybe one of the weaknesses of some of these lower movies, is that not all the actors have the strongest voices, which isn't necessarily always terrible, but in a movie that's also not as great, you don't have that to kind of balance it out. But this movie, it does have a lot of really good singers in it, so that's fun. The editing is really great in this movie. It's very zany, very fast-paced, a lot of quick cuts, and it works just really well with the comedy, the tone, the pacing of the movie, and it's a pretty like simple movie. If you've ever seen the show, the comedy is pretty straightforward. It's a classic farce, a lot of mistaken identities and silly stuff like that, but it does it well. It does what it set out to do, like I said. I do recommend this one if you enjoy the musical. Again, there are some parts that are probably gonna make you cringe a little bit, but besides that, it's a nice adaptation. It works well on screen. Okay, so now we're on to our top 3, this was a little harder to rank. I kind of knew before I started what my bottom would be and what my very top would be, but you know, the ones in the middle are always the hardest. So this might be my most controversial choice, and I am very curious as to everyone's thoughts about this movie in the comments. My number 3 choice is 2021's West Side Story, directed by Steven Spielberg. Honestly, I could probably make an entire video that's like an hour long just about this movie. I have a lot of thoughts about it that aren't even fully settled in my brain yet. I only watched it like a couple weeks ago. First off, some of the just really strong stuff in this movie, everyone's been saying it. I'm definitely not unique in this opinion. Ariana DeBose, who plays Anita, was amazing, just absolutely fantastic. She stole every scene she was in. Amazing dancer, amazing singer, great actress. I would not be surprised if she wins the Oscar for this. Very charismatic, really good for the role. Amazing casting. I think in general the casting was pretty good. David Alvarez as Bernardo was also really good. Mike Feist was really good too. Rachel Zegler was pretty good. I don't think she was as amazing as Anita and Bernardo, but she, you know, did really well. Our Tony, not as good. I think that's all we need to say about that. And another note, you know, too, like I was saying before with Forum, one of the huge improvements this movie had on the original movie is, let's just say, some more appropriate casting of the different roles of the Puerto Rican characters and things like that. That was definitely an improvement on the original, which, if you don't know, besides I think Rita Moreno, was all white actors. I also appreciated a lot. I thought that the scene where Anita goes to try to visit Tony was handled a lot better. It's always something that's really hard to watch in both the original movie and anytime I've seen a stage version of the show, and sometimes I feel like in the original version and in other productions it's kind of not taken as seriously, but they definitely really made sure it was like condemned. You're like, this is bad. And I think part of that was that they had Rita Moreno as the new version of the Doc character, so it really kind of changed the perspective on that a little bit, which I thought was done well. I don't know how I overall felt about her character. I kind of had mixed feelings about it. Please, again, I know I always say this, but it's definitely true with this movie in particular. Please tell me what you thought, because it's such a new movie. You know, I've only heard from a couple people what they thought from, you know, only a few people I know have seen it, so I'm very curious if you've seen it, what your thoughts are. I also wonder with Valentina, that's the character's name, the new version of the Doc character, how that kind of plays if you haven't seen the original movie or if you don't know anything about Rita Moreno and her original role in West Side Story. So if anybody's only seen the new movie, please share your thoughts on her character. I'm very curious. There's a lot of things in this movie that I just like don't know how I think about it. I'm not sure what I think about the new version of Cool. That's one of the songs that's been changed a lot over time because it's different in the original stage version and in the movie, and now they changed it again. I just like cannot decide in my head what's the best version of it, so I don't know how I felt about that. But there were some songs that I particularly liked the staging of. I really liked The New America. I thought they made it, one, really fun, just gave a whole different energy to it, and that was a really just enjoyable change that I think worked really well in like a newer version that was more up to date and more good for our current times, I guess. Another hit or miss with it was the cinematography. I know some people said it was amazing and really liked it, and I know a lot of people that saw it in theaters specifically really liked the cinematography. I was kind of iffy about it. I think the coloring in it was really like weird at some points too, so I also really didn't like the lens flares, if that's what that's called. I thought it was strange. I don't know, it just didn't really work for me. Some changes that I really didn't like, I really hated the new version of One Hand, One Heart that was in they were in like the cloisters and like in a church. I don't know. My thoughts on this are like so complicated. I think that in the original version and in the stage version, the setting of it in the dress shop, it really like works well with this particular version of this love story. It's very much in the setting of the world that Tony and Maria live in, and the fact that it's this like symbolic wedding kind of thing and they make it themselves, I think just works so well and is so beautiful. And with the moving of it to this new setting, it just like, it felt so much heavier and really lost all that lightness to it. And I think in general, the whole romance between Tony and Maria really just took a backseat. Part of that was just because of how much Anita and Bernardo stood out in this version. I feel like this version was less of a love story with like the themes of gangs and prejudice and that sort of stuff, rather than a story about racism and prejudice and gang violence and stuff with a love story in the background. If that worked or not is kind of up to, you know, individual opinion, and I really honestly don't know if it worked. I haven't really made up my mind yet. My gut is telling me it didn't work that well. And I think part of that is just the limitations of the story, which is, one, it's based on Romeo and Juliet, so when I'm watching it, I'm always thinking about that in the back of my head and all the different versions and interpretations and analysis and stuff. But also too, you know, it is a musical written in the 1950s by a bunch of white men. You're never gonna get, you know, as much mileage out of it with those sort of themes as you might with a show written by somebody maybe with more direct experience with that kind of stuff. Yeah, I just think there's some limitations on it that make it not like the strongest story to talk about those issues. I'm curious to see what you guys think, because I guess my mind's not fully made up on that yet. That's like my immediate thoughts of seeing this a couple weeks ago, but I don't know, they may change in a month or a day even. Another weird choice that again I don't fully know how I feel about is the idea that Tony was in juvie or prison or wherever he was before this, and that he had previously been very violent. I don't know how on board I am with that. I think part of that I didn't really like was in the original version and in other versions of Romeo and Juliet, he's driven to violence by his circumstances and by everything around him and being so exposed to all this other violence, and also by his really strong emotions, and also the fact that he's very young and very in love with Maria and all that kind of stuff. It feels a lot more impulsive and a lot more affected by everything else in the story, whereas with this backstory that they gave him. So this is future me coming to say that I think I'm realizing that they gave Chino in this new version an expanded storyline that's a lot closer to what the original Tony had. So he goes from this very optimistic, kind of naive young man to be driven to violence by the end of the show, which is I think closer to the arc that original Tony had, but now that's sort of shifted to him. I don't know. Just an interesting little observation I made. It sort of just changed his character and like the reasoning behind why he killed Bernardo a little bit. I didn't really like it. I don't know. Again, that's something that might change, that I might change around with if I watch this again. One more thing, I would love to hear from both people who don't speak any Spanish and people who speak fluent Spanish, what you thought of the use of no subtitles for all the Spanish in the movie. Because I understand Spanish a little bit, but not fluently, and it would just be interesting to see the different perspectives on that. Overall, you know, it's still West Side Story. It still has all the amazing music and everything like that that the original has, and it's still the same classic show, and it still has some of the same issues. Even though they fixed a little bit of it, there's still some things there that are always going to be there. I think it's one that I would definitely like to watch again. It's also one that I've listened to, you know, the cast recording. I've listened to the album, the soundtrack of, and it's really good, and there's some really great performances, really great songs, a lot of really beautiful moments, and really visually pleasing scenes and stuff like that. So there is still a lot of strengths to it, but I think overall it just didn't do what I wanted it to. It's like not exactly what I want out of a West Side Story movie. My number 2 pick is Sweeney Todd. Now this one kind of surprised me. I love Sweeney Todd, the actual show. However, I had never watched this movie because I was too scared. It's too scary, and I honestly might not ever watch it again, at least in its entirety, because it is very violent, but it was really good in my opinion. If you don't know, this was actually Sondheim's favorite adaptation of any of his movies. He has said that in different interviews. He talked about it a little bit when I saw him speak a couple years ago, and I can definitely see why. I think what this movie does probably better than any of the other ones is that it really makes it a film. It's very stylized. Part of that is it's a Tim Burton movie. You know, it feels very, very like Tim Burton kind of thing. If you watch it, you'll totally know what I see. Even if you just see like the poster of the movie, you're like, okay, yeah, this is a Tim Burton movie. I think this movie won Best Art Direction, I want to say, back at the Oscars when it came out, and it definitely deserved it. It's very, like I said, it's super stylized. It just has such an aura about it that really brings you into the world of Sweeney Todd. It's a very over-the-top story, but it was very grounded when it was turned into a musical, and Sondheim really did that with his writing and everything. And I think the movie took both of those elements, the kind of grounded, darker tone of the musical with the really heightened, over-the-top elements of the whole story and murders and everything like that, and it worked really well. In terms of performances, I think Johnny Depp, Helena Bonham Carter, neither of them are the strongest singers, but they both did pretty well, I think, in their roles. I've definitely seen other actors do better, but they weren't like bad or anything. Definitely the standout in this movie was Alan Rickman as Judge Turpin. He was just fantastic. He just has this very imposing, very intense kind of voice and presence that works super, super well in this role. Pretty Women is like, oh my god, it's amazing. I love their interpretation of that and the way they film it and everything, and the singing's really done really well, and yeah, it's just like a joy to watch, and that's like one of the scenes that I've definitely watched over again, like on YouTube or whatever. Apologies, I just got up because my battery died and I went to change it, and I realized there's a piece of tape on the wall from when I recorded my LGBTQ Starkey character ranking, so that's been up there for like 2 years. That's great. One of the more kind of, I guess, debated aspects of this movie that some people like and some people don't like is how they changed the opening. So the opening in the show, if you haven't seen it, is like a chorus singing about Sweeney Todd, and it's Attend the Tale of Sweeney Todd. Go listen to it. If you haven't seen the show, go watch it. It's very theatrical. It's directly speaking to the audience. So in the movie they changed it, and it's this like super, it's like very 2000s looking sequence of making the pies and everything. I don't know, I think it worked pretty well. I think if somebody else made this movie and it didn't have all the other sort of stylized elements to it, it wouldn't work. But because the whole movie is sort of like that, it felt like a natural kind of part of it. Overall, just like very fun to watch, even for me who's like a total scaredy cat and was looking through my hands the whole time because I could not watch the gore. Really fun, very scary. At least for me. I'm sure most people who like actually like horror movies are like, that's not scary at all. But for me, I was kind of terrified. Kept all the comedy and the lightness of the sort of more ridiculous parts of the show, along with the darker, more intense parts that Sondheim really added with his music and everything. The music was done really well. Obviously, like I said, but the art direction, there's also costumes and makeup and all that stuff is incredible. Yeah, it's just a really good movie. It's a really good adaptation of a very solid show. If you know what Sondheim movies have been adapted for the screen, then you know what my number one choice is. It's West Side Story, the original 1961 movie. Honestly, just there's nothing that can compare to this movie. After I watched the new version, I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm just exaggerating in my memory how much I like the original. And I rewatched just a little bit of it. I just watched some of the songs and I was like, nope, I definitely was right. This movie's amazing. It's an incredible movie. Again, like I said with the last version of West Side Story and with Forum, there's definitely some issues with this movie and some things that are insensitive, and the casting is not great with the sharks and things like that that I don't want to, you know, completely brush over, but definitely a product of its time, I'd say. In terms of the art of the movie and the visuals and the sound and everything, it's incredible. It's amazing. There's really nothing else like it. I think for me, the two sort of strongest aspects of it are, one, the cinematography. The whole look of the movie is just gorgeous. It has that very like 60s musical style to it, but in a way that holds up. There's just some absolutely like beautiful, beautiful shots in that movie, and I actually have one on my wall that's on this wall. If you've seen some of my other videos, I've filmed on my bed a couple times, and I have one of the, I think it's from the opening, from the prologue up there. I love all the scenes that take place like in the streets. The prologue and the jet song being like the main ones. Maria is also in the streets like that, and they just really utilize the space really well, and it's just so like pretty. It's so nice to look at. And my other favorite thing about this movie that is honestly unmatched by pretty much anything is the choreography. The choreography is, it's just like breathtaking. I cannot watch Cool or the prologue or Dance at the Gym without just standing with my jaw open, just amazed. It's just so amazing. It's so balletic, but also so energetic, and it really flows with the story, and it's incorporated so well with the music and dialogue and everything that it's just incredible. Like I can't say anything else. Like it's so even hard to put into words how I feel about it, because I like get emotional even just thinking about it, and it's definitely the strongest part of the movie, and I don't think there's ever going to be anything that matches it, in my opinion. I think some people think of this as more of a negative, and I've seen different opinions on the newer version where they did the fight scenes in more of a like realistic way, where it was like much more of an actual fight with like knives and fists and all that stuff, rather than basically a dance interpretation of a fight. And some people like that better, but like honestly, I'm watching a fucking musical. Like they're singing and dancing in gangs. I want to see them dance. I want to see the version of it filtered through this language of dance and music, and I just think that the original movie does that just so brilliantly. And I don't know, maybe this is partially a case of the original came first, so I'm always gonna favor it a little bit more, but I honestly don't think that's the case with the choreography. I think the music, not all of it's better. Definitely some of the songs. I really loved America in the new version, like I said before. I think that was one of the ones that they improved on. But a lot of the other songs, I think, I still prefer the original. Definitely Cool. I definitely prefer the original, even if I'm unsure of how I feel about the new one. I don't like it more than the original, and I think that's one of my favorite numbers in the movie. Pretty much all the songs with Tony I liked better in the original. I think he has a much better voice and just a stronger presence. I know that there was a lot of dubbing in this, so I don't think it's the same person singing and acting, but whoever did the dubbing, I'll look it up, has a beautiful voice. And we're talking about performances, we have to mention Rita Moreno. As amazing as Ariana DeBose was, Rita Moreno also did an amazing job in the original version. She won the Oscar very deservedly so, in my opinion, for that role. The casting is probably, in my opinion, the biggest issue with this movie, but she was definitely a good choice, did amazing in it. At least for me, the new version is always going to live in the shadow of the original. Part of that is always going to be a little bit of a negative. Again, there's some positive things that they changed, but there's just some things that even if they did exactly the same, it's never going to have the impact that the original had because they did it first. There are things that are better and there are things that are worse, but the things that are the same are always going to be favored towards the original. It's really a movie that I can never get enough of. I've seen it so many times at this point. It's one of my favorite movie musicals. But I think that's it. I don't know, I have trouble putting into words exactly how I feel about the movie, but that's my main thoughts. As always, like I've said a million times in this video already, and like I say at the end of every video, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, especially about the new West Side Story, and just on its own, but also compared to the old one. I'd also love to hear your own rankings, or if there's other versions of these shows, recorded stage shows, or made for TV, or anything like that, adaptations that you like. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. As always, make sure to like and subscribe. I know I haven't been posting as much recently, and obviously, even though he's passed, happy birthday to Sondheim, and I'll always appreciate all of his works, and I love talking about his stuff on this channel, and it's one of my favorite things to share with you guys, and I always love hearing all your thoughts, and yeah, I'm really happy to be back to recording this stuff. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye. Adios. See you soon.